Hi class, Assalamu alaikum. It's me, Dr. Sikandar Ali. I am assistant professor with the Department of IT, University of Haripur. I am teaching you software construction and development. Today we are going to take Java Lab 7, which is an online class due to pandemic. So today we are going to discuss polymorphism. Polymorphism means one form and many implementation. Every language have their own implementation of polymorphism. Rest. So here the implementation of the class diagram. So we have a class bank and they have method get rate of interest and they return nothing, return 0. We have the first implementation for the bank HBL, and we extend from the bank class, and they have method get rate of interest and they will return 8 because the interest rate for HBL is 8%. For example, we are just taking the example. So another implementation is for ABL, and ABL interest rate, for example, it is 7%, and another implementation is UBL, and the UBL interest rate, for example, is 9%. So now we have test 2 another class, and this class we have main method, and we are creating H object for HBL, A object for ABL, and U object for UBL, and then we are calling the get rate of interest through H object, A object, and U object. So they will print the interest rate of each and every bank. So this is a real world example of method overriding. Now let's discuss one question. Can we override static method? So the answer is no. A static method cannot be overridden. Because why it cannot be overridden? So why we cannot override the static method? So the answer is that it is because the static method is bound with a class, whereas instance method is bound with object. So static method have a close bond with class, where instance method is bound with object. Static belong to the class area. It is defined in the stack, while an instance belong to the heap area. Can we, another question, can we override Java main method? So the answer is no, because the main method is a static method. So we can overload the main method, but we cannot override. Now we need to differentiate between method overloading and method overriding in Java. So method overloading is used to increase the readability of the program. The main purpose of method overloading is readability. Method overriding, the main purpose of the method overriding is readability along with reusability. Method overriding is used to provide the specific implementation of the method that is already provided by a superclass. Method overloading is performed within class. We can implement method overloading in a single class, but we cannot implement method overriding in a single class. So we can only implement method overriding if we have a parent-child relationship. It means we have as a relationship. In other words, if we have an inheritance, so we can implement method overriding. If we not have as a relationship or inheritance, then we will be unable to implement method overriding. The second difference is that in case of method overloading, parameter must be different, but in case of method overriding, parameter must be same. The fourth difference is that method overloading is the example of compile time polymorphism, while method overriding is the example of runtime polymorphism. In Java, method overloading cannot be performed by changing return type of the method only, but return type must be same in case of method overriding. After this level, we have finished the basic of method overriding. Now we are going to discuss method overriding with access modifier. There are two types of modifiers in Java. The first one is access modifier and the second one is non-access modifier. The access modifier in Java specify the accessibility or scope of a field, method, constructor or class. The access modifier tell you that a field, method or constructor or even a class can be accessed outside the method, field or a class. So the accessibility will depend upon the modifier used. We can change the access level of field, constructor, method and class by applying the access modifier on it. If we keep it private, then it will not be accessed outside that field or method or class or constructor, but if we keep them public, so it can be accessed from outside. And there are other modifiers like protected. There are four types of Java access modifiers. There are four basic types of access modifier. So the first one is private. If we use the private modifier with a class, then the class data member and member function can only be accessed within the class and it cannot be accessed from outside the class. So what to do if we allow them to be accessed within the child class? So we have to change the modifier to protected. Now we have another type, default. The default access level of a default modifier is only within the package. So if we have a default access modifier, so the default means use nothing, not private, protected or public. So if you use nothing as access modifier, then it will take the access modifier is default, and the default is also very restricted. It can only be accessed within the package and it cannot be accessed outside the package. So if you do not specify any access level, it will be the default level. If you want to allow the child class to access the public class data member and member function, then you must keep the access modifier as protected. So if the access modifier is protected, so it can both access the class, it can both be accessed outside the class and outside the package, but through child class only. So if you not have any child class of a package or of a class, then the access modifier protected will be similar to private. If you don't make the child class, it cannot be accessed from outside the package. So if you want to allow them to be accessed from outside the package and outside the class, then you keep them protected and you make a child class, then you can access the package from outside the package and the member function and the data member from outside the class through child class. And if you keep the access modifier is public, so it means it can be accessed anywhere. It can be accessed outside the package, it can be accessed outside the class is there. So these are the four access modifier: private, default, protected and public. Now we need to discuss the non-access modifiers. So there are many non-access modifiers such as static, abstract, synchronized, native, volatile, transit, and many more. Here we are going to learn the access modifier only, and the non-access modifier is outside the scope of the current class. So this is the summary of the access modifier. If your access modifier is private, so it can be accessed within the class. It cannot be accessed within the package, outside the package by subclass, or outside the package. It cannot be accessed. It can only be accessed within the class. If your access modifier is default, so it can only be accessed within the class and within the package. It cannot be accessed outside the class or outside the package. If your access modifier is protected, so it can be accessed within the class, within the package, outside package, and outside class by subclass only, and through other classes within the package, but not a subclass, it cannot be accessed. If you keep the access modifier is public, so it means no restriction. It will be accessed within the class, within the package, outside the class, and outside the package. So let's discuss method overriding with access modifier, and here we want to learn how the default modifier will work. So we have a class A and which have a method message which showing a simple message like hello Java. We have another class simple which is extended from class A, and they also have the method message, so it means the method message is overridden here, and they also showing a message hello Java. So if you look here, the message method here not have access modifier. It we not write here public or private or protected. So it will take the default access modifier. And now in the main method we are creating object and we are calling the method msj. So it will call this method, but the access modifier here is default, so they will produce a compile time error. It means the default access modifier is also very restrictive. That's why there is a compiler error. In this slide we are going to discuss exception handling with method overriding. There are many rules if we talk about method overriding with exception handling. The rules are as follow. If the superclass method doesn't declare an exception, subclass overriding method cannot declare the checked exception, but it can declare unchecked exception. Here, if we not uh, declare an exception in the superclass, then the subclass will be able to declare unchecked exception, but it cannot be able to declare the checked exception. The checked exception and the unchecked exception are the type of exception. In the topic of exception handling, we will learn it in more detail. If the superclass method declares an exception, subclass overriding method can declare same. If the superclass the declare an exception, then the subclass overriding method can declare the checked exception and as well as the unchecked exception. The unchecked exception it can declare if the superclass method doesn't declare exception, but if it declare the superclass method declare an exception, so the subclass overriding method can declare both the checked and the unchecked exception. So subclass exception are no exception but cannot declare parent exception. It can declare subclass exception or can, but the only restriction is that it cannot declare parent class exception. The subclass exception cannot declare parent subclass exception. So here is example. uh, in case of input output exception, so we will import Java input output. We have parent class have one method message which showing message parent, and we have another class text exception child extended from parent, and they have message method through input output exception, and they printing the message text test exception. We have main method, we are declaring parent class object p, and we are here declaring with the object with exception, and we are calling the method of the parent class. So if we already tell that we cannot declare the parent class exception in the subclass, so it will result in a compiler error. So if you not understand the exception handling in detail, so it's okay, we will discuss the exception handling in the upcoming lectures. Here I will try to arrange some um, Tencent meeting class or some on Zoom, and if you have any queries, then we can discuss in that class face to face. Now I requested all of you to write the program in some IDE, and then you need to check the output of the program in order to comprehend the topics of method overloading and method overriding. So I think it's enough for today. See you in the next class. Allah Hafiz.